Hey everybody, Kelly Zutz here with the Philosophy Society. So it's September 4th, 2024. We're in the Toronto Metropolitan University Library. We just had like a improv talk for a little bit, and you can watch that video to see what we talked about there. Now we're going to finish off chapter, or put first things first. So we're on page 202 with the 7 habits of highly effective people. So this is, we're just going to go through what Sean Covey talked about. And in the appendix, there's quadrant 2, day at the office. So I'm going to go through this stuff without slides. I'm just going to talk. And yeah. And so let's do the appendix first. So in this, okay, I think it's important to identify a couple of things. So we've been in this chapter for a little while, right? We've let it sink in. Sometimes it's good to just let the idea sink in, and you go to your life. You're like, does this even make sense? Can I do anything with this? You know, like, does it apply, this theory? Or is it just fucking, some people call it word salad. It's like when people tell me that what I said is word salad, that's probably the worst thing.
Word salad? What how do you spell it?
Just a bunch of words all thrown together, you know, like a salad.
Word salad, okay.
It's like, okay, that's bad, you know? Is it me or is it you? I don't know.
Well, they say Canada is like salad. Talk about the multiculturalism.
That's okay.
Yeah. Which is good, you know.
Yeah, there's
salad bowl. You heard about that? U.S. is like a melting pot.
Yes.
And you know, because they require everyone to be like American, you know, like being. But Canada is one thing very funny. You know, they held a Canadian carnival, but inside it's a Korean carnival. The Iran carnival.
Oh yeah.
What is
okay?
Yeah.
Cool.
So the multiculturalism. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're in this chapter called "Put First Things First." And so, what does this mean, right? And so, let's just do a little quick summary of our trajectory here. Stephen Covey wrote this book, "The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People," and one of the main fundamental conceptual frameworks or paradigms in the book is this idea that we start in the state of dependence. We are dependent on others to meet our needs. Then we become independent, where we can meet our own needs. And then we get to a state of interdependence, where we cooperate together to meet each other's needs, right? Mm-hmm. And he has this maturity continuum and this embryonic stage of growth thing, where we develop and grow in this fashion. And so he says that before you even read anything in here, you need to understand this notion of perspective. And sometimes things will happen that will change your perspective completely. The word he uses for perspective is paradigm, which could also be your belief system, right? So you have a religious paradigm, for example.
Yes.
I had a religious paradigm, and then I had a paradigm shift. I was like, I don't know about this anymore. And that was for me. That was like a thing for me.
I am religious because I think in every society they need a God.
Okay.
But I know my God in some years should be different.
So God changes.
Yes.
All right. So that's an advanced way to look at.
If you take
God.
Greeks, Romans, Sumerians,
Yeah.
every time it's different. Even Old Testament. You see, totally
Yeah. So
different.
within religions, they have paradigm shifts, and some of them don't make the shift. Like the Jewish people of today, right, their ancestors chose to not go down the path of Jesus. They're like, the Bible, we got the Torah, we're cool. You guys, you can take the Bible, but we're staying here, right? We're not shifting paradigms. We're not changing perspectives. And then people that believe in Islam, Muslims, they went one step further. They're like, we're shifting from Jesus to Muhammad, right?
For example.
And so the reason he's discussing this shift of perspective or change in belief or paradigm shift is because he's assuming you already have a way of looking at things, and he knows that he's going to say stuff that may challenge your beliefs. So he wants to prime you a mechanism to change your belief before he even tells you. It's like a really good sales strategy.
I don't understand this part.
I know that you're going to disagree with me. So it's okay. I know that you're going to disagree with me when I tell you this next thing. So let's talk about the nature of disagreement. You may not listen to what I say. You just may feel a gut reaction. and if you don't think about what I'm saying, you just follow your gut reaction, you'll never really know if it was true. You were just kind of going with your feelings at the time. But the information I'm telling you is like real. So for example, like let's say the bank said you owe them like $40,000. Or your taxes. You're like, you know, but if you don't pay your taxes, that's bad. And maybe it's just the case that you just didn't calculate something correctly. It actually is true that you owe this money, right? And so the person calling you to inform you of this bad news from the CRA, you know, they might say, please sit down for a moment. You know, like I'm going to prepare you for this bad news. You have a certain perspective. I don't owe any money, and now I owe a lot of money, right? So in this, it's like the psychology of belief change. So when he talks about the paradigm shift, what he's really trying to do is prepare you to change your beliefs.
Right.
And the beliefs are the 7 habits. And so everybody has a way of doing things. They have a paradigm. And so he gives the example of when he was on the subway.
So the CRA, can we still stay with the CRA things? You know, so they try to change my belief.
So let's say you work for the CRA and you need to call people that had a misrepresentation on their COVID money. Right. And so now they owe like 20 grand or something for COVID. Right. And they're not going to want to hear that. They're going to be like, excuse me. And they might get upset and stuff like that. So if I talk to 10 people and they all hang up the phone, I might try to change my strategy. I'm going to talk about how to take bad news. And then I'm going to give you bad news. Because then maybe if I teach you how to deal with bad news, you'll be more likely to accept the bad news. So in this case with the book, it's just a different belief. It's that you are going to have beliefs about time management. You're going to have beliefs about your goals in life. You're going to have beliefs about proactivity or making decisions, right? And he says, and so what he's doing in the book, this book, he prefaces the actual book with this paradigm shift chapter, right? To get us ready to change our beliefs. So it's smart. It's a super, I haven't ever seen a book do that before. And so that's the first thing. And then what he does is he talks about the first habit. You want to put into habit certain principles. And one of the principles is being proactive, which means does it make sense now? Okay.
But it could be a manipulation.
Brainwash.
Okay.
I want to change your beliefs. I want my beliefs in your mind.
Yeah. So how do we know the difference, right? So manipulation, there's 2 things, manipulation and persuasion. So manipulation is when I'm deceiving somebody and I'm using them as a means to an end, for example, right? I'm manipulating them. Whereas persuading is educating somebody for a specific perspective, and then through that educational or informative process, they agree with you. You have persuaded them. There was no deception in there, right? And so a paradigm shift, you could coerce somebody or manipulate them, right? Like you can use violence, for example, to try to force them to believe you. Or you could explain to them why being proactive is better than being reactive. And being proactive under his definition was to decide what your response will be instead of just being reactive, right? It's making a decision on how I will respond to whatever's going on in my life, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is this principle called begin with the end in mind, which really just means know what your goals are, figure that out. That's a process. Once you figure that out, all of your decisions are more effective if they're in line with your goals, right? I recently had something where I've taken space from going out dancing, and now I focus on just being a student, and I feel better because I was like spread too thin between 2 different roles. I couldn't do them both. And even though I like the dancing thing and there's something there for me, it cannot, I can't, I have to really make it tertiary. It has to be on the outer limits of my being or myself or my project. you know?
Mhm.
And then it's consolidated myself because of this, where I spend my time doing during the day and what I have made decisions in the past to direct myself towards.
Is
So I-
that is sorry?
Hmm?
That's Channel.
Go ahead.
Because you said the principle second two. Principle two is like with an N in my mind now, right? You know, what's the exact word for that? The principle two.
Values or goals.
Yeah. But the strategy is to have an end.
Begin with the end in mind.
We can begin there with the end in mind. But the movie,
Mhm.
the Dan Milman actually talk about it's if you cannot have what you want, you're still okay. You know, because the
Yeah.
process is the most important.
Okay.
Because here, so I was thinking, you know, if this talk about end, but what is that? You didn't get the end.
Yeah. So this is great. So Stephen Covey gives us two ways to determine this. One is our roles, the role I play within my life, within my social network, or an organization. The other one is your goals. So the movie coincides with Covey's theory in the role category. You can have goals in life, but we need to just make sure they're realistic.
This exercise is, if you can't control outside, don't worry.
Yeah.
Don't think about, forget.
Can you say that again, sir?
It's stoicism.
That's very important.
They said that it dictates. If you can't control what is outside, don't worry about it. Don't think. It's a waste in your life.
Mhm.
Focus on something realistic and something is you can control. For example, you can't control the weather. Don't worry if tomorrow is -40.
But what about the weather means that you will be late for the work and you need to go to work to make money.
If it's sure you can control the time. Be ready, be reactive.
Proactive.
Not in this case, reactive.
But what
If you are late,
yeah, I'm
you
just,
could before, yes, but later.
but what if I have like a serious, I become serious at you, I have cancer, then how do I be, you know, the pain is right here. I'm just saying.
Accept the reality.
Accept.
Accept. You have cancer. Okay. I'm gonna die. Pancreas. Okay. I have 2 months in my life. Steve Jobs.
But it's so pain. It's so pain.
Well, Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher, would say, no matter what, you don't have to cry about it. Even if the king, quoting, paraphrasing, is going to behead you, as you walk to your death, you can have a smile on your face.
Can smile every second.
Which in some ways can be a little unrealistic, but he's just trying to,
No.
The king gonna behead me, I'm just gonna smile.
yeah. It's just trying to say, don't suffer over things that are out of your control. That's really what they're trying to say. Okay, so we have the paradigm shift, which he calls inside out, start from within, which is your paradigms, and then your beliefs and behaviors will flow from your paradigms, right? And then he goes into, he explains his general theory, and then he goes into be proactive, right? Decide on how you will respond. And then he talks about decide what your goals and your roles will be in life, and then do those things. And then the third chapter, the one we're going to finish today, put first things first. Really what the main thing about this is to ask yourself, whenever you're about to do something, is this important? And does it need to be done right now? And when you ask if it's important, that goes back to the second habit, right? Which role of my identity or myself does this fulfill? Or which goal does this fulfill? And there might be, and I recently had like a conflict of self, because I'm like, I there's something that's making me upset, and because I'm not fulfilling that part of something that I want. But then when I look at my like personal mission statement, right, which you just explain what you want, is not there, actually. when I actually started thinking about it, I was like, I'm getting some anxiety and or suffering from this thing that I'm not doing for myself in my life, right? And then I'm like, well, then I thought, well, where am I? Like, part of me kind of says, this is what I'm doing with my life. I have this like idea of what I'm doing with my life, and that's not in there. And that thing would be the same thing as his personal mission statement. Don't really explicitly identify with that. But when I look at my day-to-day, what makes me happy and sad, it actually makes me upset frequently. Right?
Can you say it again? Maybe say it. What's your personal mission statement?
So one part of it is this philosophy society thing. So it's to understand human nature and then explain it in some way to reduce people's suffering and to make a better society. Right? And so there's different ways to do that. So one way I'm doing it is studying in university for a very long time. And another way is I'm doing this group. I'm writing stuff. And we can discuss, well, is this the best way? You know, like
So you want to reduce, you want to reduce people's suffering.
Mhm.
Why?
I think because I suffered a lot. And then it just was like,
It's in your, all this in your mind.
Because you suffer a lot, so you want to reduce suffering, other people's suffering.
yeah, when I was very young, I had this, like, there was a moment where I was like, I know my suffering currently is bad. And I know because of the population and the states of certain societies that other people have it worse. And so it's really bad for me. I found meaning in devoting myself to reducing the suffering of others, which is very similar to the Buddhist bodhisattva vow, that before they enter nirvana, they will eliminate all suffering from all sentient beings, kind of thing. And I like that. I think we can massage that, but it's useful as like a property, you know? So, okay. So
That's good.
the quadrant 2 stuff. So as you're going through, right, your experience, you ask yourself, what is the best use of my time, really? Because he would talk about how you can go by how you feel, right? You're feeling something.
No, just use your time. What is your purpose in your life? Is
Yeah.
aligned your actions, your goals
Yeah.
to your purpose of your life is
Yeah,
clear?
yeah.
Or is procrastination, as you said,
Sure.
procrastination is I waste my time. Just move it with my friends, and everything
Yeah.
doesn't matter in my life.
Is that why you give up your dance?
I gave up dancing for now. She wanted me to go and I didn't go. She's like, you're going to be there, right? And I was like, no. She's like, okay. Cherry Beach, the beach party. I gave it up because of its priority in my list of my personal self. It's just,
The dance doesn't reduce people's suffering.
dance is important. It's not reducing the suffering. It's like creating like enjoyment.
Right. But
Right.
creating enjoyment is not the top on your list. So and
Yeah.
when you
It's true.
when you find out it's too thin, of your resources, time, whatever. So you kind of is that what happened?
I think so. They're very good. Very good.
Just
That was
guessing,
great. That was great. You did good.
using your
Yeah, you did great. Okay, so let's come back here. So we have this quadrant 2 thing. And so what he says is if there's good uses of time, it's important, but it doesn't need to be done now. So we're going to rank how important it is, right? And then what he says is that over time, you're not going to be in crisis mode. So you won't be in this constant fight or flight suffering and then have to repeatedly be healing yourself because of all the stress you're in. You're actually going to be in a state of your existence where things are just done and you feel good about it and you have time to do other stuff, right? Because of being proactive fundamentally. Okay, so we went through the chapter predominantly. So that was like a little summary of the book up until now. And so what we're going to do is just kind of read through first on page, in this edition, 401. So let me just get this for you.
Quadrant 2 day at the office. Quadrant.
Yeah, I'm just gonna look for this
Quadrant
for
is-
after we're inside out again. Oh, it's over here. Okay, here you go. Yeah. Here you go. So that's quadrant 2 day at the office. Okay, so we're gonna go through this. She's just listening. All right, very good. Okay, so yeah, we're back here. So this is his example of what it means to do quadrant 2, how to look at things from this quadrant perspective. And I think the most important thing to draw out of this chapter is just thinking about importance and urgency and how you sort your time. Okay, so it says the impact of a quadrant 2 paradigm in the business setting. You're the director, so for example, you're the director of a marketing.
Sorry, I didn't find it. The following exercise, right?
401.
Yeah. The following
Yeah.
exercise.
If you want to use this pencil, you can.
Sure.
You're the director of a marketing company at a pharmaceutical firm, or the marketing department at a pharmaceutical firm. And this is like an average day for this manager. And there's more items to do that day than you can do. So it's like, how are we going to manage our time? So he has 10 things on his list here. Number 1, having lunch with the general manager. He's like about an hour, or an hour and a half. And then to prepare a media budget, that might take 2 or 3 days. Looking in his in and out basket, that could take 1 to 2 hours. Talking to the sales manager about sales and stuff like that, that could take 4 hours. He has some items, that his secretary says he has to do, that could take an hour. Catching up on medical journals, that could take an hour. Preparing presentation for a sales meeting for next month, that could be 2 hours. There's something wrong with one of the products. They didn't pass quality control. Somebody from the FDA wants to talk to him about that product. And then there's a meeting at 2 p.m. with the executives. So what he wants us to do is go through this list and use habits 1, 2, and 3 to schedule your day as this manager. And so he has an 8 to 5 schedule thing here, right? So you can kind of just try to schedule. It's like an exercise. So by asking you to plan one day, automatically eliminate, so on 402, automatically eliminating the wider context of the week, which is fundamental to his 4th generation time management. And he says, the power of the quadrant 2 principle-centered paradigm in the context of 1 9-hour period of time. So we're going to apply this paradigm to this situation. Most items on the list are quadrant 1 activities, with an exception of item number 6, catching up on medical journals. Everything else is seemingly both important and urgent. It's got to be done right away, right? That's how you would maybe see it. A 3rd generation time manager, using prioritized values and goals, they would have a framework for making such scheduled decisions that would perhaps assign a letter to each, like ABC, and then a number, 1, 2, 3, or whatever. And they would consider the circumstances, the availability of other people involved, and then just try to have a logical time relative to each one of the things. The 3rd generation time manager would have done this exercise that way. They would schedule themselves based on assumptions that they've made or identified, and they would accomplish or at least begin most of the items in the day and then do the next day or whatever. They would just push the other ones back. Most people indicate that they would use the time between 8 and 9 a.m. to find out exactly what's on the agenda in the executive board meeting so that they could prepare for it. Page 403, they would set up the lunch with the manager around noon, return the call from the FDA, usually plan to spend the next hour or 2 talking to the sales manager, handling the correspondence, look at the product that had a problem. The rest of the morning would be the visit with the general manager and then the 2 p.m. board meetings. This is generally how people would go through this day. The afternoons usually spent attending to the unfinished matters, like the correspondence and his mail and stuff. The media budget preparations in the following year, they would put off until another day. They're quadrant 2 activities, so they get pushed. The long-term thinking and plan, but they still have long-term thinking and planning. The medical journals is a quadrant 2 activity, but it doesn't seem as important as the other ones that were mentioned. So this kind of thinking is 3rd generation time manager. And then he says, well, which approach did you take? Was it similar to the 3rd generation approach, or was it more of a 4th generation approach? And so we're like, well, what do you mean by 4th generation? What are you trying to say here, right? So he says, in this book, you can go to page 173. Let's just double check that. And that's your time management matrix, right? So the urgent and important, the 4 quadrants, right there, right? Okay. So the quadrant 2 approach, page 403. Let's go on the items on the list using a quadrant 2 approach. So one possible scenario. Others could be created, but this is like one approach. So as a quadrant 2 manager, you recognize that most production activities are quadrant 1, and most production capability activities are quadrant 2. So this goes back to his story of the goose and the golden egg, right? The only way to make quadrant 1 manageable is to give considerable attention to quadrant 2, page 404, by working on prevention and opportunity and by having the courage to say no to quadrants 3 and 4. So he's going to go through each activity. So this is how you deal with each of them, he says, one way. The 2 p.m. board meeting. Assume that 2 p.m. executive board meeting did not have an agenda. The result, people tend to just come unprepared and they just improv. They just talk about stuff. It's disorganized and primarily focused on quadrant 1 issues, which are important and urgent. A great deal of ignorance is going around between the people at the meeting. Meetings generally result in wasted time and have inferior results, and it can be an ego trip for the executives in charge. So that's not good. So in most meetings, quadrant 2 items are usually categorized as other business. Work expands to fill the time allotted for its completion. Parkinson's law, I'm not sure. There usually isn't time to discuss them. If there is, people have been so beaten and smashed by quadrant 1, they have like by crises that are an emergency, they have little or no energy to address them. So you might move to quadrant 2 by first attempting to get yourself on the agenda so you can make a presentation regarding how to optimize the value of executive board meetings. So the first thing he's saying is, let's have an agenda, right? Spend an hour or 2 in the morning preparing for that presentation. If you're only allowed a few minutes to stimulate everyone's interest in hearing a more extended preparation for the next board meeting. So at least give them like a pitch to how to discuss stuff. The presentation would focus on the importance of always having clearly specified purpose for each meeting and a well thought out agenda to which each person at the meeting has the opportunity to contribute. So he's trying to structure this better, right? So it's not wasting time. The final agenda would be developed by the chairman of the executive board and would focus on quadrant 2 issues, require more creative thinking rather than quadrant 1 issues that are more mechanical. The presentation would also stress the importance of having minutes sent out immediately following the meeting. So like notes from the meeting, assignments given and dates of accountability. Place on appropriate future agendas that would be sent out and plenty of time for others to prepare and discuss them. So that way people can be more effective because they know what they're talking about and they can review what was talked about before. What might be done by looking at one item on the schedule. The 2 p.m. Okay, so now we're going to switch. The 2 p.m. executive board meeting through a quadrant 2 frame of reference, 405, requires a high level of proactivity, including the courage to challenge the assumption that even you need to schedule items in the first place. Requires consideration to avoid the kinds of crisis atmosphere that often surrounds a board meeting. Every other item on the list can be approached with the same quadrant 2 thinking, except for the FDA call. So next item, the FDA call. Based on the background and quality of the relationship with the FDA, you make the call in the mornings that whenever it reveals it can be dealt with appropriately. So you don't know how long it's going to take, so you just do it right away. Difficult to delegate this task to somebody else. Another organization is involved that may have very quadrant 1 crisis management culture and an individual who wants you, not someone else, to talk to. You may attempt to directly influence the culture of your own organization as a member of the executive board. Your circle of influence, which is in the proactive chapter, is probably not large enough to really influence the culture of the FDA. So your circle of influence is limited to your own organization, not so much on the other organization that you have to work with. So you comply with their request. The nature of the problem uncovered in the phone call is persistent and chronic. You can approach it from a quadrant 2 mentality, an effort to prevent such problems in the future. So you're going to put more time in as a preventative thing, right? And that makes it quadrant 2. Requires considerable proactivity to seize the opportunity to transform the quality of the relationship with the FDA to work on problems in a preventative way. So the quadrant 2 approach, which is it's important and not urgent, is to just work on the relationship itself with the regulatory board, the FDA, or whoever that is. It could be like even your manager or whatever, but it's an external organization, so that's why it's important, right? To work out some means of relating to them as an external organization. So lunch with the general manager. You might see having lunch with the general manager as a rare opportunity to discuss some longer range quadrant 2 matters. It may also take 30 to 60 minutes in the morning to prepare for. So you decide to have a good social interaction and listen carefully without any plan. Either possibility may present a good opportunity to build your relationship with the general manager. So you're saying this is important. It is important to invest in that, right? As a PC, a production capability activity. Preparing for the media budget. You call in 2 or 3 of your associates most directly connected to the media budget preparation and ask them to bring their recommendations in the form of completed staff work. Only requires your initials to finally approve. So they get things ready and you just have to accept it, right? You don't have to design it by yourself. Outline 2 or 3 well thought out options you can choose from, page 406, and identify the consequences of each option. A full hour sometime during the day. Go over the desired results, guidelines, resources, accountability, and consequences. Investing this 1 hour, you tap into the best thinking of concerned people who have different points of view. Spend more time to train them and what this approach involves, what completed staff work means, how to synergize around differences, and what identifying alternative options and consequences involves.
So sorry, this is preparing the media budget.
Yeah, and so
is it you designate the task to other people?
yeah, it's delegation fundamentally. A lot of it, he wants to delegate tasks and train people how to do things for himself, which comes from that whole Christian aphorism. You give a man, teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime, you feed him, he eats for a day, kind of thing.
But when you talk about designation, normally you designate those things on quadrant 3, right? That's a strategy, like urgent but not important. Then you designate to other people. So if this thing, media budget, is it fall into quadrant 3?
You communicating to them, it is important, right?
It's important.
Even though it's not urgent.
So it's quadrant 2.
Yeah, I think it's important too. I think it's a quadrant 2, the media budget thing. It is important. Depending on when you're having this meeting, its urgency can like if it's due tomorrow, then it may be urgent today, right? So he's just trying to say delegation is the best way. That's a big part of his organizational discussion input first things first, is that you don't have to do everything yourself.
The lunch with the general manager is a quadrant 2, right?
Yep.
So I guess it maybe because maybe there's still a different level of urgency between lunch with the general manager and the media budget. That's why he cannot designate somebody else to have lunch with the general manager. He has to do himself. So because then it takes his time.
Mm-hmm.
But the media budget he can designate other people do it so that he can have time to have lunch with the general manager.
Yes,
exactly.
exactly.
So there's still difference of urgency, even though those are important.
Sure. Yeah.
Can I say that?
Yeah. Okay. So we spend more time to train them, and which this approach involves, what completed staff work means, how to synergize around differences, how to come to an agreement or work with each other's differences, and would identify alternative options and consequences involves. Okay. The in basket and correspondence. So his mail. Spend some time, perhaps 30 to 60 minutes, beginning the training process with your secretary. So again, delegating, so that they can gradually become empowered to handle the mail and the correspondence. Give them a rating of what they can deal with and what they can't, and then he just deals with the most difficult stuff. Training program might go on for a few weeks until the secretary is capable of being results-minded rather than methods-minded. The secretary could be trained to go through all the correspondence and the in basket stuff, analyze them in as many as they can. The ones that they can't do can be organized, prioritized, and brought to you with a recommendation or a note for your own action. Within a few months, your secretary or executive should be able to handle 80 to 90% of all the mail. This could be email too. It's much better than you doing it yourself, so that you can focus on more quadrant 2 opportunities instead of the quadrant 1 stuff. So the sales manager and last month sales, a possible quadrant 2 approach to this issue would be to think through the entire relationship and performance agreement with the sales manager to see if the quadrant 2 approach is being used. The exercise doesn't indicate what you need to talk to the sales manager about, assuming that it's a quadrant 1 item, so it's urgent and needs to be and important. Take the quadrant 2 approach and work on the chronic nature of the problem. So you could train your secretary to handle the matter without your involvement and bring your attention only to what you need to be aware of. The quadrant 2 activity with your sales manager and others reporting to you, so they understand 407 that your primary function is leadership rather than management. They can understand that they can actually solve the problem better with your secretary than with you, and he lets you do more quadrant 2 stuff. The sales manager might be offended by having your secretary make the contact. Begin the process of building a relationship between the two of them so you can eventually win the confidence of the sales manager towards quadrant 2 approach. So just delegating again, fundamentally, right? The medical journals. Reading medical journals is a quadrant 2 item you may want to procrastinate. Your own long-term professional competence and confidence may be largely a function of staying up to date with the science or whatever the literature is. You may decide to put the subject on the agenda for your own staff meeting Suggest a systematic approach to reading the medical journals to be set up among your staff. Members of the staff could study different journals and teach the rest of the essence of what they learned to all future staff at the meetings. Supply others with key articles or excerpts that everyone really needs to read and understand. So just share the study time amongst everybody, right?
Good question. So let's say sometimes, you after you do this analysis, that's something you should do. For example, you should read the medical journals. But your internally, your shape or your mood, just not for that reading. You just don't want to read. It's like you probably we all have this moment.
Yeah.
I know I need to do this. I need to finish this homework. This is my priority. This is according to whatever. I just not in the shape to do it. I just so want to do something else. I just want to just listen to some music, go to dancing. I know dancing is not my top agenda, but I just cannot read it. So
two things. One is the balance discussion that we had earlier today, right? Maybe you need to heal a little bit,
right?
And that's good. Do that, right? The other thing is sometimes we just have to start the activity. Just like get the journal on your computer and just like read the title and just do little incremental bits instead of looking at the entire thing and then becoming demotivated because it's so much to do, right? And then distributing the information amongst others, if you're in a team context, can help with that as well. Okay, so next one on 407, preparing for next month's sales meeting. A quadrant 2 approach may be to call together a small group of people who report to you and get them to do an analysis of the needs of the salespeople. Assign them to bring a completed staff work recommendation to you by a specific date, giving you enough time to understand it and implement it. Involve their interviewing of each of the salespeople to just discover their real concerns and needs. So a lot of this is just learning how to delegate stuff, right? Yeah. Involve sampling and the sales group so that the sales meeting agenda is relevant and is sent out in plenty of time so the salespeople can prepare and get involved in appropriate ways. So it's just how to like manage an organization through delegation, really, so that you don't have to do it, right? Getting them to manage it for you.
Is it use them as a means?
Yes, but they're also their end is all you want it also to be integrated into that. So they're getting paid for it. It's a job. They know they're doing it. They're free to go other places. So I don't think it's unethical in that way. They want to help. We're all working on this together, That's the assumption. If someone really doesn't want to do it, then we can talk about that, right? But then maybe they just don't need to work there. That's what the job is. Rather than prepare for the sales meeting yourself, delegate the task to a small group of people who represent different points of view and different kinds of sales problems. Let them interact constructively and creatively and bring you a finished recommendation. Not used to this kind of assignment, spend time meeting the challenging and training of them, teaching them why you're using this approach and how it will benefit 408 them as well. Beginning to train your people to think long-term, be responsible for cleaning staff work or other desired results, to creatively interact with each other in interdependent ways to do a quality job within specific deadlines. The product X that had a problem with quality control didn't pass quality control. The quadrant 2 approach would be to study the problem to see if it has a chronic or persistent issue, delegate to others if the careful analysis of that problem with instructions to bring you a recommendation, simply to implement what they come up with and inform you of the results. So let them experiment and try to figure and solve the problem. So in summary, the net effect of the quadrant 2 day at the office is that you're spending most of your time delegating, training, and preparing a board presentation, making one phone call, having a productive lunch. By taking the long-term PC approach, production capability, in a matter of weeks or months, you won't face such quadrant 1 scheduling problems again. So it's just that he had a lack of delegation that built up and just was seemingly taking up all of his time. Go through this analysis, thinking of this approach seems idealistic. Wondering if quadrant 2 managers ever work in quadrant 1. It is idealistic. The book is not about habits of highly ineffective people. It's about habits of highly effective people. And being highly effective is an ideal to work towards. You need to spend some time in quadrant 1. The best laid plans in quadrant 2 sometimes aren't realized. Quadrant 1 can be significantly reduced into more manageable proportions, so you're not always in the stressful crisis atmosphere that negatively affects your judgment and your health. Take considerable patience and persistence, and you may not be able to take quadrant 2 approach all the time, or even most of the time, but you can begin to make some headway with a quadrant 2 mindset and yourself and other people. And then in the future, you'll have huge improvements. And like I said, just start right away thinking the next activity, you're like, is this important? Is this urgent? What could I do now that will help me in the future the most? So one last paragraph, let's just finish this. In a family setting or small business, such delegation may not be possible, but it does not preclude the quadrant 2 mindset, produce an interesting and creative ways within your circle of influence to reduce the size of quadrant 1 crises through the exercise of quadrant 2 initiative. Okay, so that was that was the appendix thing. So now we just have to do, which is not in your book, but we're going to go through this last portion right here. But you can say something quick.
Okay. So, isn't that this just gives me a feeling that he basically he assumed that it would take care of the quadrant 2, it will reduce the huge amount of quadrant 1. But we live in a society. There's a lot of things we cannot control, like something happened, just happened to you,
Sure.
because the environment just bring it to you, whatever, we cannot be conscious all the time. Maybe I ride a bicycle and then someone hit me, or I hit someone, whatever.
Uncontrollable.
Yeah,
things.
uncontrollable factor. So even though I focus a lot on the quadrant 2, but quadrant 2 is not the whole world. The whole world bring me a lot of uncertainties, like urgent stuff.
Yeah.
That force me into dealing with the.
Yeah.
They put a lot of quadrant 1 stuff to me.
Yeah.
It's not like the assumption sometimes doesn't work. I cannot assume that the quadrant 2. I think it's quadrant 2 will take care of the whole environment.
No, it's not supposed to do that. What it's supposed to do is reduce the amount of crisis immediate things that you have to spend your time doing. And so when you reduce that, you actually have more time, right, to deal with crises that you're not in control of, that you have to deal with. But you can, all the ones that you are in control of, you can reduce the impact of those on you by doing things in advance, is kind of what he's trying to say, or getting other people to do stuff for you.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Like today I had to deal with something.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And because I had time to deal with it, and I dealt with it, and I dealt with it in such a way that I do not have to deal with it again. Right? Done. There was some cost involved, but it's just better to not have this as a problem. Now this is one variable, boop, I don't have to worry about. It's not because it's something I can't control. It's another person, but now that they don't affect my life, it doesn't become a problem anymore.
Where's your? I'm just curious. Where's this membership fee in your? Is it in your quadrant? When you deal with your financial whatever,
Mhm.
Where is that in your?
That's a quadrant 2 activity.
Quadrant 2 activity.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Like me working on all that stuff, that's quadrant 2 for sure.
One more thing, I will add something. One new takes. You have very objectives. This is urgent, is important. All this you can identify. And what about subjective? What about your motivation? Perhaps it's very important and it's very urgent, but you are not at all motivated. Or it's not really important and your motivation is great. What I did at the beginning in the morning, I did what I'm not really motivated, the ugly task, because it's more important or challenging. I don't like do it, but I have to do it in the morning. At the end of the day, I do what I love because it's my motivation. I like this activity. I like these people. I call the phone. It's great. So it's more subjective. It's tridimensional. So I will add this new eggs.
All right, well that's great. Like
we are humans. We are not robots. And now you are humans. In some years, perhaps we like artificial intelligence, but as humans, we have this more feelings.
Cool.
And sometimes feelings is more important. It's bidimensional eggs.
Well, that's like the balance thing too, right? Like you're progressing up, and then sometimes you might be stressed out and you feel like doing stuff, and that's your motivation. And I think that there's healthy ways to make yourself feel good, and then maybe unhealthy ways, in the sense that like there's more long-term negative consequences of some things. Like if you get drunk and then you're hungover the next day, now like that as a mechanism is like prevented you from doing stuff the next day that's good for you. Whereas maybe if you just ate something good and went for a walk, you would have felt better too, you know?
Right. And most of the time you don't like a task, especially with your boss.
Yeah.
And you have to do it.
Mhm.
So you put here in bidimensional this dimension, but when you have the third one, you know how is my real priority.
Okay.
Your dance perhaps is not important or not urgent, but
Yeah.
it's you are really motivated.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. Yeah.
This is this dimensional. You put your list motivation.
Okay, that's cool. All right, so let's finish this thing really quick. All right, so at the 202, you don't have this part. It's in the new book. So, so new insights on habit 3. Put first things first. This is his son, Sean Covey. So, they're younger. His dad's planning a trip. He's like, "Are you ready?" The trip is going to be in 3 years. They took out their planner, and the planner didn't even go that far. So, his dad had a grueling schedule. And
What does grueling means?
Challenging or difficult. And he was the master planner, putting first things first and blocking out time in advance. But this habit didn't come naturally. So this next section is called the urgency addiction on 203. So put first things first is difficult, and it can be a struggle for a lot of people. So why is habit 3 so difficult? The urgency, plain and simple. Reality is that most of us are addicted to urgency. So what Sean Covey does here is he gives this urgency index, and it's a little scale, and you can take the test. He has how many questions here? 16 questions until 206. And so you can get yourself on how much of an urgency mindset you have. So I had 19, so I have a low urgency mindset. Okay. So if you're like most people, you have an addiction to urgency or you're developing one. So one thing from a psychometrics thing, I'm not sure how valid or reliable this little test is, but I guess it's fun. So you can go through it. If you're in an urgency mindset, it's self-destructive. Busyness, and as a thing, just doing stuff, is like a status symbol. People's status can be measured not by how much leisure time you have, but if you're doing stuff. So this Schultz guy says, unlike a century ago, when Americans showed their status in leisure time, busyness has become the new badge of honor. Everyone is busy and no one is productive. Busyness has actually become the way to signal dedication to the job and leadership potential. Productivity is relatively easy to measure on a factory floor, on the farm, but we don't have good metrics for measuring the productivity of knowledge workers. Rely on hours worked and face time in the office as markers of effort. With the advent of technology and the ability to work remotely, being connected and responsive to all hours is the new FaceTime. 207. So again, just doing stuff.
What does this mean? Sorry.
Just doing stuff, right, doesn't mean you're actually being productive. So we can always go back to the Pareto principle that 80% of our results comes from 20% of our efforts. For certain things that are very mechanical, like shoveling,
It's Pareto.
Pareto principle.
I remember there's a wording on the movie Shawshank Redemption.
Sure.
We are either busy to live or busy to die. So we're always busy. Doesn't matter. Busy to live, busy to die.
Yeah, that's a busyness thing. That's like not being comfortable with the present, right? Always looking towards the future because this isn't good enough, or looking towards the past because it was better. And that could be functional and helpful in some instances, but I think it's, yeah. Okay, let's keep on going because we're going to finish this today. So 207, shift your paradigm. The solution to overcoming your urgency addiction is to shift your paradigm from one of urgency to one of importance. So I've been asking myself, I'm like, is this important? And then I would say no. And that's the general's tent thing, right? I might be upset about something, like, for example, some people stole some stuff from my house the other day, and they could just ask for it. And I was like, I might go down a trajectory of dealing with this theft issue, but then I ask myself, how important is this?
Oh, that's great. Good question.
Right? And it's not, actually. Even though I feel my principles were violated and my trust, it's not important. There's other things that are more important, like just doing nothing, just sitting there, right? Let's keep the ball going here. Okay, so he gives these distinctions between the urgency and being a quadrant run is procrastinating, It's urgent and important. So they end up having these crises all the time. Prioritizing is the quadrant 2. It's not urgent and it's important. Quadrant 3 is the yes man. It's not important and it's urgent, but you just say yes to everything. Quadrant 4 is the slacker. It's not urgent and it's not important. They just do whatever, right?
I have to go.
Right.
It's getting late.
It's okay. I'm almost done. You want to wait or you want to leave?
I have to go. I have work tomorrow.
Just leaving.
I have time tomorrow if you want to see me tomorrow.
Okay.
Let me know.
Okay, I will.
What time?
It's nice seeing you. You look great.
Good. You have time tomorrow? For coffee?
Something. Yeah. Yeah, because she has to talk about some stuff. That's right. Okay, so the time matrix. That's this little quadrant thing we have here. Difficult to stay out of quadrants 1 and 3. Their data. I'm not sure how valid or accurate this data is, but or if it's how much bias is in there. Their data shows 51.2% of people spend their time in things that are urgent. Named each of these quadrants after their characteristic. So I went through that. Quadrant 1, procrastinator. Spending too much time here includes stress and anxiety, feeling burnt out, and mediocre performance. Page 208. So he has like a little diagram of stuff. The yes man quadrant, people who live in quadrant 3, they have a hard time saying no to anything that is urgent or popular, resulting in staying incredibly busy while getting nothing important done. Quadrant 4 is the slacker. Anything done to excess involves quadrant 4. Chilling out and streaming good movies. A single movie leads to 2, 3, or 4. It becomes a waste of time, leading to feelings of guilt and apathy. Quadrant 2 is the quadrant of quality. The prioritizer, that's where they live. But in their study, we only spend 30% of our time here. Quadrant 2 results in an improved relationships, high performance, and balance. Where we make a fixed time to be watching stuff instead of just doing whatever. The return on time and energy you spend in quadrant 2 is exponential, page 209. The return on quadrant 1 is only equivalent to the input, and the return on 3 and 4 is non-existent. And so the key to spending more time in quadrant 2 is to reduce the amount of time you spend in quadrant 3, the quadrant of deception. Quadrant 3 seems important because it's urgent. It tricks us. When time is scarce, we go through what psychologists call tunneling. I'm not really sure of this. We can only concentrate on the most immediate and low level of value tasks. The urgency mode thus causes us to lose about 13 IQ points. I don't know about that. That's unverified statement he's made.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Like study philosophy. Is that quadrant 2?
Yeah, for sure. Well, we could discuss its importance, right? Like, is it really important? Maybe some philosophy is not important.
There are some philosophy is important and some are not.
Maybe, yeah.
For example, going to your philosophy society, is that quadrant 2
I'd like to think so.
for everyone?
Yeah. It's like exercise. It's a quadrant 2 activity.
So using this diagram,
Yeah.
means if you spend time in philosophy society and the energy, it will bring this much 10 times of this, right? If you come to philosophy society.
I'd like that to be the case.
How do you prove that?
Well, we could do we could have a control group of people that don't come to the philosophy society and then measure their do a measurement of wisdom or well-being, right? We can measure how frequently they're stressed out, their sense of community. It depends on the factors that the philosophy society is bringing to them and their participation in the philosophy society, right?
Because there's a saying that reading philosophy, it's kind of like compared to like reading some practical knowledge, like how to buy stocks, whatever, or reading this kind of books, it's really it's not something that you can use. It's like it generates empty, it's like nothing. It seems like a lot of things, but it also means nothing, Like
I don't know.
they say it's a useless book sometimes, because it's a long-term thing, maybe too long.
Mhm.
You heard about that, the philosophy. If you study philosophy, you couldn't find a job,
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
right? So how do you prove this? Oh,
What we have to do is study.
bring a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, money, I think value is
A value,
I think value is a better way to
yeah.
say it.
But you couldn't find a job. I'm just challenging you now.
No, it's okay. But it depends on what the goals are. The goal for me was never to find a job. The goal for me was to establish a coherent theory and organizational structure that represents that theory. And so that's been my goal. And there's things that you could measure the philosophy society and what it's giving people. Is it reducing stress? Is it providing a sense of community? Like I said, are they learning things? Right? And are those things that they're gaining reflected or helping them in their daily lives? Right?
Yeah, it sounds good, but did you notice that I'm just just heard reading some of others. So the society don't really value this kind of job, like reducing stress. This society give money, the resources to some other positions. Like to the investment bankers. To internet company. But you're doing good stuff, but Socrates is very poor, so you're helping, but you're like a volunteer, like a working for NGO, whatever. You're doing good thing, but the society don't value that.
But the role of your philosophy, according to you, is to find a job or be happy in a job with your boss, with your colleagues.
But they say, with this, you couldn't even find a job. Because you say, it helps you be happy in a job, but the prerequisite is that you have to have a job first. Otherwise, if you don't have a job, you can't. How can you be happy in a job?
Well, the philosophy, this is a business question. As an organization, how can it function as a business? And there have to be certain needs that it meets within society. So an analogy would be like the mental health institution, though that as a big institution. There's the wellness retreat stuff I've talked about before. And then there's religious groups that generate a lot of revenue and income. And so it would be meeting similar needs to those groups, right?
And find a job is a journey. And the human resource is the final decision. Perhaps human resource is nothing to do with philosophy, but the journey in between could be very helpful.
So the idea is that it's going to compete with those other entities, and how well it does it, we could discuss that, and then we could change it and approximate it to a closer, better result. Okay, let's finish this stuff. Yeah. So the remedy to quadrant 3 is start saying no. Say no to responding immediately to every email or text. Say no to serving on some community board. Say no to whatever is not important. The key to saying no is having a deeper yes burning inside you, which goes back to habit 2, begin with the end in mind. Clarify the few things you do well, then start saying no to everything else. The enemy of the best is the good. So Emerson said the crime which bankrupts men and nations is turning aside from one's main purpose to serve a job here or there. Page 210. That was a good quote. I like that one. So he talks about, he wrote the teens book. He has a great sense of stewardship, making the 7 habits come alive. He had to say no to a bunch of other stuff, including his family and his job, to work on the book. Block out time in advance. Next section. The time management at Franklin Covey, the business that him and his family have about his dad's stuff, is something that they talk about. They set aside 30 minutes each week to plan their week, and it changes people's lives. If you're only planning on a daily basis, you're just managing crises. If you know that, I always say it like that, crises. If you know that 30 minutes of weekly planning can significantly leverage the other 168 hours of the week, why wouldn't you do it? So his dad would sit down and write out his roles and his goals for each week, and then listen to his conscience relative to what he thinks is morally correct and his personal mission statement. And he believed that relationships are the stuff of life, and that effective people prioritize people over things, relationships over schedules. 211. We're almost done this section here. Okay, so there's a story about this captain at the airline, Denny Flanagan, and he treated the passengers almost as they wanted to be treated, right? And so he would delegate and get them to do stuff like help each other out, and he would buy them pizza and stuff like that. And if they had to wait, he would make it more pleasant. He gave raffles and stuff like that. And the proactive form was, quoting at the end, Every day I work from my heart and choose my attitude. So he was being proactive in choosing how he was going to deal with these people that are in a stressful situation. And he was rated like one of the best pilots ever just because of the way he treated them. Even though they had a lot of setbacks because they had to wait for delays and shit. So last section here, 212. You think the captain of an airliner would have more important things to do than take pictures of pets? The essence of putting first things first. Believes that spending the majority of his time in quadrant 2, preventing urgencies, planning ahead, building relationships, results in a great return on friendship, customer loyalty, and personal joy. Boom. So that's put first things first.
Question.
Yeah.
So, the principle 1 is being proactive, right?
Habit 1,
Habit 2 is like have an end. Right?
Begin with the end in
Yeah.
mind. Yeah.
So I mean, why this order? What because the other thinking is that you need to have a goal first. You need to figure out your
Yes.
goal first. Then you can be active.
No.
Then you have passion. Because you know what you want to. Look, I want to be an Olympic. Gold. Then I'm working. I'm active. But why being proactive is number 1 is before you have a goal.
To decide that goal is being proactive. To decide the goal, you have to think about what you're going to do. What is my response to being alive? I'm going to go into the Olympics, right? Why am I doing that? Because it's fundamental to who I am as a person, whatever that might be. The first thing is the paradigm shift understanding. Then it's the principle of proactivity. And then it's being proactive to who you are and what's important to you. And then it's how do you schedule your time based on who you are?
Do you think proactive is more skill or habit?
Attitude.
They're both the same. Or attitude or habit. Skill and habit are kind of the same. Skill is refined and you're paying attention to it and you're getting it towards a goal. Like if there's training in a skill. Whereas habit can just be whatever. Like you just smoke cigarettes. It's not like a skill of smoking cigarettes, right?
The reason I ask is because somebody may ask you this. I don't have a goal in life. I'm a nihilist.
All right.
I don't find passion. I don't find any goal that worth pursuing. So because of that, I cannot be proactive. How do you respond to that?
Well,
I don't have a goal that I was pursuing. That's why I laid that.
Yeah. The person just doesn't really understand themselves. And there may be some, that's why we do feeling good first, right? Because they're most likely depressed. And in the book, he goes through his David Burns goes through examples of apathy and like that's part of what it is being depressed. He has a chapter called Do Nothingism, which people just sit in bed and do nothing and then they become depressed. Well, it's because of the way they're living their life.
So the feeling good is before this book.
Yeah.
It's more fundamental.
I think so, because it helps us deal with our emotions.
Because I kind of had a question. So why be proactive will be habit 1?
Because
but
you
people
have
gonna be why I should be proactive.
Yeah.
Why? Is it because if I don't proactive, I will be in danger? Why is that?
because you have to work within what you have control over. And so it's being reactive. You just go through your old paradigms. He wants you to decide a new paradigm based on principles, based on reality.
You see, these days, people play video games, all day, spend their time on like this. How do you persuade them that, or if people feel like this is okay, this is freedom. I can choose whatever I want. Why do I need to be proactive? I just play I'm just giving you an example. Or I just lie down. I just do nothing. I just don't push myself so hard. I just relax.
In some ways, that's not a principle-oriented approach, right? That paradigm has to do with the person's psychological state, and so we can explain their state or what's going on with them psychologically and respond to it that way. Views about themselves, like core beliefs, certain habits that they have. But with the principled approach, it gives you an ideal normative standard to always shoot towards as an aim or a goal, right? It's not your existing state or your existing habits that you're just working off of.
There's many reasons. One of the bottlenecks that high, in my opinion, is to avoid risks.
Okay.
You have your list of risk, the action, and what is in case of who is responsible of this action. In case of is another one is how to handle unknown situation. When you are proactive, all is under control.
Yeah.
All the crazy, all is madness. It's crazy. I have the reaction is because you don't have a plan. You have a proaction as a consequence.
Well, what if I was already born, for example, in a rich country, my medical care has been already been taken care. I don't, you see one of the highest suicide rate a country is Denmark.
Mhm.
A rich country.
A rich country, so the people don't think, I don't have to go. Everything's being taken care of.
Yeah.
Why I should strive? I don't have a goal to strive for. So I just so it becomes the company in that way.
Yeah. And that's why studying philosophy and some psychology is important. Like a core base, like what does it mean to be human, and how do you how do you live a good life, right? And that's part of the theory that this is supposed to provide for us, right? That meaning and purpose can be created through developing a goal that's coherent and significant, and they're lacking significance. It's not beyond them, right? Significance is a goal that connects to humanity as a larger category than just something that's specific for you. And so some people could be having a family, right? Other people could be like doing research or helping democracy around the world, right? That's a goal that's beyond you. And so it becomes significant. Okay, we're going to finish it for today. We got a lot of time there, and we will maybe do the next chapter next week. I think so. Next week we're going to do at least, I guess we'll just do this. He discusses public victory. So here, and if you can get the book, that's good. This version, I think you can get it for like around 25, something like that, $30 at BMV, or you can order it online. And so this is from page 215 to 234. It's about 15 pages. Right? Okay. Boom.